you, Vicki. It is 7 o'clock. I will call the meeting to order. Welcome to our Committee of the Whole meeting for Tuesday, April 6th. Let's begin with the roll call. Mr. Teixeira, please.
Mayor Patterson.
Present.
Deputy Mayor Hicks.
Here.
Councillor Dickert.
Here.
Councillor Fitzsimmons.
Present.
Councillor Fleet.
Present.
Councillor Hocking.
Here.
And Councillor Cable. All here and accounted for.
Thank you. Good evening, council, staff, guests, our viewing public, and the media. Council, does anyone have a disclosure of pecuniary interest or a conflict of interest? Councillor Fitzsimmons.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'd like to declare on item 5.1, our first delegation, as well as report 7.1 as the general manager of Hanover Bentic and Brand Access Society and Hanover Raceway. They're mentioned throughout and part of the tourism strategy. So I will refrain from any comments or questions.
Okay, thank you. And of course, if one should arise during the meeting and you realize you do have a conflict, you may declare it then. Item 3 is agenda additions and deletions. We do not have any this evening. So we'll start with our health and safety message from Councillor Cable.
Thank you, Your Worship. Spring cleaning safety tips. From clearing out eaves troughs to firing up the barbecue, it's finally spring cleaning season. Avoid potential hazards by following common safety tips. Ladders. When cleaning out eaves troughs, place ladders on solid footing and have a spotter. Avoid overextending your reach and help keep any needed tools close at hand and easy to reach. In backyards, do a quick walk through of your yard to check for stones, debris, or garbage that may have accumulated over the winter. Severe injuries can result from stepping on objects or hitting them with your lawnmower, so make sure your grass and walkways are clear. Wear protection in the grass. Wear safety goggles, sturdy shoes, and long pants when using lawnmowers and other machinery. Wear gloves to protect your skin from irritation, cuts, and contaminants. Barbecues. Before turning on your grill, examine all the components to make sure they haven't been broken or damaged during the winter. Don't forget to check for small animals like mice, which can block gas lines and cause an explosion if turned on. Thoroughly clean all grilling surfaces before placing food on them. And finally, air it out. If cleaning indoors, try to opt for natural cleaners like vinegar, water, and baking soda. Not only are they effective at removing dirt and cleaning windows, but they won't expose you to potentially harmful chemicals. If stronger chemical cleaners are needed, keep children away and open windows to keep the room well ventilated.
Very good, thank you. Okay, item 5 is our delegations, and we have 2 this evening. The first one is we have Mr. Chris Hughes. He is with BC Hughes, and he's going to speak to us about Hanover Retention and Attractions Campaign. Chris, it's all yours.
Thank you, Your Worship, and good evening, everyone. And I'm really sad I can't be there in person because I really need a donut fix from Hanover. So I'm just going to share my screen here.
Okay.
There, everybody should see that in a second here. There we go. Just going to switch that over there. Okay, so hello everyone. As Mayor Patterson mentioned, I'm Chris Hughes from BC Hughes Tourism and Destination Consulting, and we are located just outside of beautiful Shallow Lake in between Owen Sound and Shallow Lake. So we're Grey County residents and Grey County business. And we have a lot of fun working on tourism development and economic development strategies throughout Grey County and Bruce County, as well as across the province. We do quite a bit of work provincially as well. So it's a great field to be in, and we're honored to work with great communities such as Hanover on a great strategy like this. And a little plug for April. She's been an absolute dream to work with on this project. And yeah, it's been a lot of fun. So what I want to talk to you tonight about briefly is the attraction and retention campaign, and we've been working on it for several months now, and it's coming along well, and I just want to walk you guys through it. We've presented to the Cultural Roundtable and to the Economic Development Committee, and it was thought that it would be good to bring this to council as well. So in terms of project approach, the way how we started the project, we defined the goals, target audiences. Through research, we identified the opportunities and noted the gaps. We determine partnership opportunities. Then we thread everything together under an overarching program framework, which I'll talk to you about. And then we develop a marketing and communication plan for each of the target markets that we've identified. So it's quite a different approach that we have developed, where we try to speak to individuals directly, and our campaigns, we don't like to do, you know, broad spray and pray type campaigns. We like to get as specific as possible and speak to people directly, and social media, you know, obviously plays a large role in that and helps us to deliver that message. So as we know, cultural assets are economic drivers in and for a community. Culture adds vibrancy, depth, and interest to life in Hanover, but of course you guys already knew that. The role of the Cultural Roundtable in this project, we've kept them on board right from the beginning. It's really to get people excited, get their peers on board, be leaders, and be change agents. And in terms of the Economic Development Group, leverage local resources to grow the economy, strengthen Hanover's position as a regional center, increase working relationships with the business community and neighboring municipalities, create a progressive and evolving framework for long-term prosperity. And the role of the Economic Development Committee here is to encourage and support existing businesses, communicate why Hanover is a great place for business, make doing business in Hanover easy, and collaborate to reach greater heights. In terms of the project framework, as I mentioned, we've developed 4 individualized campaigns that will be all threaded together to create an overarching economic development program framework. The umbrella program aims to support economic diversification, including leveraging culture as a means to attract new families to the community, build employment opportunities, expand existing businesses, and encourage investment. And in terms of threading all of the pieces together, we've developed a new identity for the program and for you guys to all rally behind, and it's called the HIP program, Hanover's Innovative People Program. So we had a lot of fun, and we used your brand style guide for Hanover, and we developed a very individualized identity for the overarching program. This was created to centralize resources, provide a single location for recruitment and investment information, create continuity for future campaign efforts, and additionally, creating an overarching program allows for alignment, integration with the people and business streams of Grey County economic development. It's bold, it's forward-thinking, it's inclusive, and it aligns with Hanover's existing brand guidelines, as I mentioned. So that's the overarching framework, and within that, we've got the 4 different campaigns. This is just a sample of what the program could look like, you know, as we go out to promote the program within the community of Hanover. So it's a lot of fun. In terms of campaign number 1, this one we've themed The Apprentice. And the whole idea behind this program is to increase the exposure of apprenticeships and leverage Launchpad within the community. So the overarching goal here is to engage and retain local youth. So the approach is to drive awareness by targeting 13 to 16-year-olds to make them aware of some apprenticeship opportunities and how charting this path can lead to some pretty awesome careers. The Apprentice campaign focuses directly on speaking to youth currently located in Hanover and the surrounding regions. And the campaign components is to create a local apprenticeship partnership program, reinvigorate the Launchpad Youth and Activity Center brand, level up student awareness of Launchpad, develop a trades are cool video, and promote that video using social media to the target audience of that 13 to 16-year-old audience. So this one is fun. And the overarching goal of this program, you've probably heard us talk about, or heard April talk about, is the goal is to eventually become the apprenticeship capital of Canada. Nobody has made this claim, and we think that because of Launchpad's, you know, significant involvement in the community with youth, that this could definitely be something that could be attainable. So that's sort of the overarching goal of The Apprentice. In terms of campaign number 2, this one we've themed Matchmaker. And these are just working titles. They're not necessarily going to the consumer. I know there was some discussion at the last meeting we had about the theme Matchmaker of it potentially being a dating site. But it is, that's the reason why we called it that, is sort of it's a matchmaking situation where we compare local residents up with all the different cultural types of activities that meet their profile. So it is sort of that matchmaking concept. But the goal here is to leverage the critical mass of cultural assets in the community, increasing Hanover's positioning as a vibrant cultural community. The sub-goal is inspire Hanover residents to participate in and become aware of all the cultural assets available within the community. You guys have done a ton of work on your cultural master plan, and it's time just to bring that to the community, bring that to the forefront. And the approach here is to match a local resident with a custom cultural itinerary based on their individual profile, leverage the depth of cultural mapping assets already collected in addition to the new resources identified. So it's kind of a fun way to have through a website where we propose that we do this matchmaking system that could be a lot of fun as well. So the campaign, the campaign components here are volunteer identification, create a microsite with quiz functionality, create a branded sign stamp sticker and digital graphic that could be distributed throughout the community, identifying those cultural resources, press release and other communication assets, and then digital ads to the local Hanover constituents promoting all of those cultural resources. So that's number 2, called Matchmaker. Campaign number 3 is called Vegas North. And this one is a lot of fun as well. And the goal is for new resident recruitment. And the approach here is to not fight what's already brewing, literally focus on leveraging Hanover's developing entertainment district to create festival city vibe, attractive to urbanites who are looking for a new community to live in. The digital campaign will leverage cultural assets like music, the racetrack, casino, the theater, coupled with microbrewers to appeal to the under 30 demographic through video content. So that's how we propose to get this message to individuals who are potentially looking for a new place to live. The campaign components here are gather background stats and information on who exactly those people are, video creation, driving them to a microsite, and then again, those targeted video ads deployed to them where they're surfing their social media channels. So that one is really targeted towards that new recruitment phase and getting new people into Hanover who are potentially we can use the hook of the whole Vegas North Entertainment District aspect. In terms of campaign number 4, the last one, this one we themed Startup Sarah. And the goal here is to recruit entrepreneurs. So the approach is to attract creative thinkers, tinkers, and toolers to the region by leveraging the CIP Startup Incentive and additional business supports available in the community as a way to entice new business to put down roots and thrive in Hanover. The campaign will be a highly targeted digital ad campaign deployed on Instagram and Facebook, which will encourage young entrepreneurs to customize their dream business in Hanover. The campaign components for this one are identify local business gaps and partnership opportunities, gather testimonials and imagery, again, utilize a microsite to house all the information, and then deploy digital ads to the people who are interested in potentially relocating a business or starting a new business in Hanover. In summary, so we have 4 very targeted campaign approaches targeting 4 different groups of people, all branded and themed underneath the HIP program. It's fun, it's targeted, and it's creative, and we're really looking forward to rolling it out. So if there's any questions, I think I was almost 10 minutes on the dot.
Very good, very good. Okay, if you can stop sharing your screen there, Chris, I'll be able to see all of council.
Yep.
Because I'm sure there's comments and questions. I have one question, Chris. What is a microsite?
A microsite is just basically a small website. So it's like a sub-site underneath a larger website. So the microsites will be targeted specifically to those individual campaigns. So there'll be one for Vegas North, there'll be one for Matchmaker, and there'll be one for Startup Sarah.
And you could still access them through the main.
That's right. It'll be underneath and all framed underneath that HIP umbrella. So underneath HIP will be those other microsites. And then we're going to leverage the Launchpad website we're not going to recreate another website because Launchpad already has a pretty robust website.
Right.
Thanks
Good.
for the question.
Thank you. Okay, questions, comments? Councillor Dickert.
Thank you, Your Worship, and thank you, Chris. Very good presentation. Just wondered, is there a success measurement component to this, like once you've launched, and how we track what kind of successes we're having with it?
Yeah, for sure. We can track obviously through the amount of views and traffic that goes to the microsite. But as part of the overall website, there's going to be a contact form that we're going to encourage people, if they've got questions, if they want more information, if they want to sign up for more information, then we can gather and create a database of interested people. So that's in my, in my world, that's the ultimate litmus test, is when we can collect names and addresses of people to actually sign up for a program. We've done that in Owen Sound with the various campaigns that we've ran, and it's worked considerably well.
Okay, that was actually my next question, was, has this type of program been done somewhere else, and what kind of successes did they have with it?
Yeah, so with Owen Sound, we did the Are You Most campaign, the relocation campaign, and that resulted, actually we were able to track, that resulted in 7 people moving to the city of Owen Sound over the course of 2 years. And we had approximately 120 really validated, interested leads in relocating to the city. We just came through the what a lot of people are calling the pajama campaign, to where we've claimed the title of Work from Home Capital of Canada for Owen Sound, which has gotten coast to coast media attention, and it's driven considerable interest, and again, generating that database of leads. The city has a huge list of people who are potentially interested in moving to the city. So it does work, and that's why we like that really focused, targeted approach.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Deputy Mayor Hicks, then Councillor Fleet, then Councillor Cable.
Thank you, Your Worship. And Chris, thank you very much for that presentation. I got to tell you, I'm really excited to have seen that presentation. That's something I can really get behind. And I think that's something that the people of Hanover can really get behind. And people want to be a part of something exciting. And this is exciting. What's exciting about it is that it's not trying to be everything. I love that you've taken 4 very, very good things, and it comes from that strategic thinking that we have done. So I can tell that you've weighed into that theme of youth and the theme of apprenticeship. We've been talking about this stuff for years, and this is really starting to put some meat on the bones in terms of where we want to go with our young people. The matchmaker concept, really powerful, and the startup Sarah, really, really cool, tangible, practical, achievable goals. And I'm just really excited to see this come forward, and looking forward to where it's going to go.
Awesome. Thank you for the comments.
You, Councillor Fleet.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thanks, Chris. This is pretty exciting. Just on the Vegas North, I would like to sort of see our theater and restaurants and bars included. I know you've got music, racetrack, casino, and the microbrewery, but I'd like to see our restaurants, bars, and their theater included in Vegas North. Just my own personal feeling.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That list wasn't meant to be sort of inclusive. That we're looking at the whole, all the community assets when it comes to entertainment, for sure.
Good, thank you.
Good. Councillor Cable.
Thank you, Your Worship. And thank you for your presentation, Chris. This might be a question for you or perhaps for April. But we know that COVID has really altered the tourism and entertainment industry. And I was just wondering, like beyond the campaign, have we considered how to either financially or through in-kind contributions, how to support entertainment initiatives in the town of Hanover moving forward, just to make sure that these types of activities are happening and resuming in the post-pandemic world? Okay.
I'll let April take that one.
Thank you. Through you, Your Worship. Yes, thank you, Brandon. We, Councillor Cable, we're still realizing what the funding opportunities are, but at this point that are being released provincially and those supports, but locally, this is our opportunity to support those assets, and because we're going to help market them, we're going to help collaborate. We want to reach out to our neighboring municipalities. So I think we could view this as our ideal opportunity to lend those supports, and then to further that, as other things come down the pipeline. But, looking back at survey responses to businesses, marketing is high on their list. And so if we can, like we said, have this targeted approach, I confidently feel that all businesses will benefit from it, and they can buy into it, they can celebrate it, and it'll help us all work together.
Excellent. Thank you.
Councillor Hawking.
Thank you, Your Worship. Great presentation, Chris. I had the pleasure of hearing Chris at the combined economic development and the cultural roundtable discussion, and it was really well received. And I just want to point out to council that this is so exciting, and I'm in the same camp as Deputy Mayor Hicks. It wasn't just a few years ago that the economic development sent to council a recommendation to do a cultural plan. And we completed the cultural plan. And from the cultural plan, we developed the cultural roundtable. And we are meeting tomorrow as a cultural roundtable. And one of the agenda items is going to be the HIP program. So we're really on board. We're excited. There's great opportunities, lots of enthusiasm. And I thank you again for spending some time with us tonight, Chris. It's been great working with you so far, and I've got great expectations from you. So you're going to deliver.
Thank you.
Okay, any other comments or questions? Very good. Thank you, Chris. As you can tell, everyone is excited, and the fun part is there, so it will be good. Looking forward to what's going to happen in Hanover and the area. So thank you for coming this evening and your presentation.
Great. Thank you. Good night, everybody.
Good night. So our second delegation this evening, 5.2, we have Mr. Ben Sumner with a backyard poultry proposal. So Mr. Sumner, all yours. And you're on mute.
It was bound to happen. Good. Good evening, everybody, and thanks for having me here. As mentioned, my name is Ben Sumner, and I'm a resident here in Hanover. This is my first foray into anything municipal related, so I don't know if this is the right format to follow, but bear with me and we'll see how it goes. So I'd like to bring forward a proposal to amend Hanover's bylaws to permit the keeping of small flocks of backyard poultry. I've sent a document that I think you've all got access to, which I'll reference throughout, and that's probably the best way to get some more detailed information. But I'll start with some background and rationale. So both food insecurity and the environmental impact of food production and distribution are increasing concerns to a lot of people. Food insecurity impacts a lot of people throughout Canada, and it negatively impacts social, mental, and physical health. And this has been brought to the forefront for many people as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. Small flocks of poultry raised by families are a practical way for people to increase their own food security and reduce their environmental impacts. But poultry have commonly been prohibited in urban areas because of the perceived nuisance and health impacts. Small flocks, though, in appropriate locations and in appropriate circumstances, can be kept without causing undue nuisance to residents in urban areas. And I've got some references there throughout the document that I sent along. So Hanover's animal control bylaw currently prohibits the possession of livestock, and that includes poultry. Appendix 1 on page 5 is a summary of the relevant sections from our current bylaws. Quite a few municipalities in Ontario have recently amended their bylaws, though, to facilitate the keeping of backyard poultry with appropriate limitations. Relatively locally, this includes Meaford, Saugeen Shores, Central Wellington, and the City of Guelph. And for comparison's sake, we'll take a look at Meaford's bylaws and Guelph bylaws. Meaford, being relatively close geographically and in terms of size, is a good comparison. They have a relatively restrictive bylaw. Guelph, on the other hand, has a much more sort of loose bylaw in terms of the requirements that they interpose. So for starters, we'll just take a quick look at Meaford's bylaw and some of the things that they permit. So currently they do permit backyard hens, so strictly just female chickens. Appendix 2, page 7 has a summary from their bylaws in terms of the relevant sections. They don't directly limit the number of birds, but they require appropriate housing, and they regulate provisions for accessory structures in their zoning bylaw. So it's a combination of minimum space requirements per bird and maximum size provisions for accessory structures that essentially indirectly limit flock size. Their zoning bylaw addresses matters like lot line setbacks, lot coverage, maximum building height, and setbacks from other dwellings on adjacent lots. And it's their poultry bylaw that addresses matters such as minimum space required per bird and minimum care and cleanliness requirements. I can't find any specific rationale for their minimum space requirements, but one of their municipal planners advised me that it may come from a keeping your birds healthy toolkit from OMAFRA. And I've got a link where that should be located down below, but OMAFRA has indicated to me that document's not currently available. So with Meaford's process, you have to apply to the municipality for approval and register your flock, and part of that is an attestation that you've read a couple of documents, including that one that's not currently available. So that's a bit of a flaw in their system. Guelph's current rules, on the other hand, they permit the keeping of backyard poultry. Again, Appendix 3, page 12 for a summary of relevant sections. Their definition of poultry is a little bit broader. It includes chickens, geese, ducks, and pigeons. Again, flocks have to be registered, and they have a hard cap of 10 birds, regardless of what sort of bird it is. So a pigeon and a goose are handled with the same cap. Roosters are prohibited, but not male birds of other species. And their provisions for construction of poultry housing are covered entirely by their existing zoning bylaw. Their minimum care and cleanliness requirements, rather than being laid out very specifically the way Meaford has theirs, they're very general provisions of their standard animal control bylaw. So a bit of commentary. So species and gender restriction, Meaford only allows female chickens to be kept, whereas Guelph's bylaw prohibits roosters but not males of their other species. In order to minimize the likelihood of a nuisance complaint, restricting backyard flocks to smaller species and quieter species or genders is a rational measure. Larger birds like geese and turkeys, and those which produce significant amounts of noise regardless of their gender, something like a guinea fowl, are certainly less suited to urban spaces and shouldn't be included in the list of permitted species of backyard poultry. Other acceptable species should be covered though, and I would suggest things like female chickens, hens, ducks, or quail as acceptable species. Flock size restrictions. Guelph caps their flocks at 10 birds. And again, I think if you've got 10 turkeys in your backyard, that's probably more than what is necessary or appropriate for an urban setting, but having a hard cap is still, it's a rational measure. And I would suggest something like 5 birds is a reasonable maximum. In terms of minimum space, quality of life provisions, Meaford prescribes minimum indoor and covered outdoor spaces per bird. And I can't find any specific sources for the minimum dimensions that they cite. Regardless, hard and fast rules on minimum space requirements are a little bit misguided, especially if you're considering different breeds of chicken, for example. If you've got a bantam breed of chicken versus a standard size breed of chicken, they've got totally different requirements. So setting hard caps on minimum space requirements is really an unnecessary and irrational measure. Rather, Guelph relies on existing legislation, for example, the OSPCA definition of distress, to establish their minimum care requirements. This is more in keeping with industry standards, including best practices established by the National Farm Animal Care Council, and I've got a link in the document to their information. They use general terms that allow some flexibility based on species and breed, which allow for some appropriate adjustments depending on which animals you're keeping. So using existing minimum standards of care established by appropriate bodies is the appropriate approach when dealing with backyard poultry rather than trying to reinvent the wheel. So some other measures that we could consider putting into place, keeping with Hanover's restriction on outdoor fires within the central business district, backyard poultry flocks could also be restricted from this area in order to reduce the probability that backyard poultry might take away from the professional image of Hanover's small businesses. In keeping with established standards regarding the registration of dogs and cats, poultry flocks should also be registered with the town. It's nice that there's a system essentially that's already in place there that we could easily piggyback on, I think. And some simple measures can be incorporated into Hanover's animal control bylaw to reduce the probability that backyard flocks would cause any sort of nuisance in other parts of town outside of the business district, including establishing a minimum distance for coops from neighboring residences. So just to wrap up, in conclusion, with some appropriate limitations to minimize the probability that they'll cause a nuisance, backyard poultry can be permitted within town limits. Systems have been implemented in a number of local municipalities to facilitate the establishment of backyard flocks. These forward-thinking municipalities made some simple changes to their bylaws that enable their residents to proactively address food security and to minimize their environmental impacts. And with similar amendments to Hanover's existing bylaws, the town could join these municipalities and empower residents to make some positive changes. So finally, Appendix 4, page 13, I've suggested some amendments to Hanover's existing bylaws, which would permit backyard poultry flocks with some measures to ensure both bird health and minimize the likelihood that flocks might cause nuisance concerns. And ultimately, the amendments that I've suggested would permit birds of suitable size and demeanor, including female chickens, ducks, and quails, limit flock size to no more than 5 birds, would require flocks to be registered with the town. It would hold owners accountable to a standard of care established by provincial legislation, specifically the Provincial Animal Welfare Services Act of 2019. It would maintain the prohibition on backyard poultry flocks within the central business district. And there would be some other measures to minimize the probability that poultry would be deemed a nuisance, including establishing minimum setbacks from neighboring residences and set some standards for the handling of feed and manure. So that's really all I had to present. I think I've got a lot of information in the document that I forwarded, but given 10 minutes, I can't go through it in a ton of detail, so I will leave it at that.
Thank you very much, Ben. You've put a lot of work into that. Thank you. Questions or comments for Ben? Councillor Fleet and Councillor Cable.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thanks, Ben, for your presentation. You really did your homework. You got a lot of information there. I have 3 concerns, and one being odor, one being noise, and the other one being cruelty to the bird. And I'd like to, all 3 of those items to be addressed, and that we have no concern with any of our residents before I, can make any type of decision. So, anyways, that's where I stand. Maybe you can fill me in with some information on that.
Yeah. So with regard to noise, that's why I've suggested it would certainly be appropriate to limit certain species of birds to quieter species and smaller species that are less likely to produce noise. So things like turkeys, guinea fowl, roosters, yes, absolutely granted, they would produce a fair bit of noise. And that's why I would suggest limiting permission to things like quail, ducks, and hens. Mm-hmm. In terms of cruelty and concerns like that, absolutely, I also agree. And there are provincial agencies that it's their mandate to deal with that sort of stuff. So I've specifically cited some information from, like I said, I forget what act it was, but it's essentially the act that's overseeing the Provincial Animal Welfare Services Act. So if we can abide by standards that are set by existing legislation, I think that it should certainly help to avoid those concerns. And then also in terms of odor, I've also written into my proposals how to address any feed concerns and making sure that it's not going to be attracting rodents, as well as handling manure and either composting it appropriately or disposing of it.
Okay, thank you. Thanks.
Councillor Cable.
Thank you, Your Worship, and thank you, Ben. I quite appreciated how this was laid out. There was a lot of great information. It was very concise, which I appreciated. I think it's wonderful that you've taken the time to bring this forward. We don't often have delegations from Hanover residents, so it's quite nice to have you here. I think that over the last 2.5 years, concerns about livestock in Hanover have been probably one of the more regular conversations that I've had with Hanover residents. And I think that it's often the noise associated with livestock that have been the primary concern that I've heard. And I know that other municipalities have passed similar bylaws. I had the pleasure of speaking with a member of council from a neighboring municipality this afternoon about their chicken bylaw, which has similar restrictions to that which you proposed. There may be a little bit more specific because I think that theirs is hens only. But from the conversation that we had, things have been quite positive in that particular municipality. I guess similar to Councillor Fleet, my concerns would be around the noise, potential odor, as well as the attraction of prey species. Those would be my kind of primary concerns. So I'm certainly not opposed to further discussions on this topic, but I wonder if this is also something that we could look for a staff report or perhaps some recommendations from our planning committee as well.
Okay. Ben, did you want to comment any further on the prey species or not?
No, I mean, ultimately, there's always going to be a risk if you've got chickens or ducks or any livestock. There's always going to be the chance that you could be attracting things like fox or whatever into town. But I think in general the risk of that is relatively low. I didn't think about that or didn't write any specific control measures for that into the proposal that I put here. But certainly it's worth some consideration for sure.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor Hicks.
Thank you, Your Worship, and thank you to Ben for that presentation. It's obvious that you've done a lot of work and a lot of thinking on this subject matter. Your materials were very well laid out. It was well researched and well presented, and I have to say quite persuasively presented, particularly the argument for me around food insecurity. I'm very interested in ways that we can feed our poor and help those who are struggling financially to be able to feed their families. With all that said, I have to tell you, I'm not at all supportive of this proposal of yours. I look at Hanover and I see Hanover as being a small urban municipality, focused on the word urban. And evidence of that is that we are one of only 2 wholly designated primary settlement areas in Grey County. So it's just us and Owen Sound. Every place else has got other designations, but we are the only 2 that are primary settlement areas. That said, I think the function that we have is very different than a West Grey or a Chatsworth or any of those other places, or Meaford for that fact. We have a different role to play in the larger plan, official plan, if we want to call it. For me, food insecurity could be addressed, and you've got me thinking. I think, if anything, your presentation has done, it's got me thinking about things like maybe more promotion of community gardens. I know that they're really popular in many, including Toronto, by the way. The lineup and the waiting list for, one of those little plots that you can get in many of the communities is huge. It's very popular, and I think it goes a long ways towards food insecurity. And I think it's something that maybe we could look at. I don't think having a bylaw that permits chickens is really the way to go. I think if you want to raise animals, there's a lot of space not far from Hanover. You can go, 3-4 minutes drive outside of town and find appropriate spaces. Now, maybe you don't own that space, I get it, but the similar thing happens with people who maybe want to have some animals. Maybe they want to have some goats or maybe a horse. They've always dreamed of having a horse, but they want to live, in the town. So partnering up with farmers or people who own land outside of the urban area might be a way for them to still be able to do what they want to do and not have it be that far. What was the other point that I make? Yeah, just that. I think it's already happening with things like horses. And if you want to have a small hobby farm, you might go to somebody and say, hey, do you mind if I set this up and I'll pay you X amount of rent per year? And you can have that opportunity. But for me, the chicken thing in our urban setting maybe runs afoul. I'm sorry to make the chicken joke, but I had to.
Fair enough.
Okay, thank you, Deputy Mayor Hicks. Councillor Fitzsimmons.
Thank you, Your Worship, and thank you, Ben, for, I think, a very well laid out and thoughtful presentation. I have a number of concerns very similar to Councillor Fleet and Councillor Cable, not the least of which is noise and nuisance concerns, because regardless of how far away from your house the birds are, squawking birds in your backyard is still squawking birds in your backyard, just not maybe quite as loud, even in small numbers. You can definitely hear it, and I'm thinking in terms of my neighbors, where they'd have to be for me not to hear it. I think I'm not sure where that would be exactly, to be honest. I think certainly the smell is a concern as well. And one thing that hasn't been mentioned by anybody else is I think this could be a real management problem for a bylaw officer as well, with issues taking up his time from this also. So I think, I'm open to further discussion about it, but I definitely have some concerns there.
Thank you. Further comments or questions? Okay. Councillor Hawking.
Thank you, Worship. Yes, I was most impressed with the documentation in your presentation tonight, Ben. My take is from a totally different perspective, and it was a real life experience that happened to me. I had a listing that was next to a property that was raising chickens, and I was showing the property, and everybody was all in favor of putting an offer in. And then the chicken came running out and the person said, oops, not here. So what happened in that case was the person lost out on a sale of a property due to someone else's presence of chickens. So I think it does have a detrimental effect on the saleability of a home should that person ever want to sell it if you're sitting beside a home that's got raising chickens. Just a comment.
Thank you, Councillor Hawking. Normally in this process, what we would do is ask staff to bring a report back, as Councillor Cable mentioned. And if council is in agreement, I would like to do that, ask staff to bring a report back, and we'll discuss at a future meeting the pros and cons of backyard poultry, and then we'll go from there. Any other suggestions, council, or we're good to go with that? I'm seeing some nodding heads. So, Councillor Hawking.
Yeah, it seems to me that the majority of council are not in favor of this. So why would we spend all this time for staff to present a report that is ultimately going to get turned down?
Okay, you want to just sort of do maybe nodding your heads? Do you want staff to bring a report back or not? If yes, nod your head. I'm seeing 1, 2, 3, and no on the report. 1, 2. So we're going to ask staff for a report. will be fair to our delegation, which I think is appropriate. He's put a lot of work into this, and I'll ask staff to bring back a report, and we'll go from there. So thanks very much, Ben. We appreciate your presentation and all your information.
Great, thanks for your time.
Okay. Okay, so moving on, item 6, staff reports. We have 6.1. This is report CAO 0621. The subject is electronic signature policy. It's from our CAO, Brian Teixeira, and I need a mover and seconder to put that on the floor. And I'll take Councillor Cable and Deputy Mayor Hicks. Brian, all yours. You're on mute.
Okay, now can you hear me?
Yes.
So if COVID has done nothing for us, it certainly sent a message that we're going to be doing a lot of more things electronically, not only in the near future, but probably well into the future. As such, you know, it makes sense that we have a reasonable approach to securing and obtaining digital documents and signatures. And we have a policy in place to deal with this. There's various pieces of legislation that were considered in putting together this policy. Bill 190, which is the COVID-19 Response and Reforms to Modernize Ontario Act, amended various provincial legislation to permit electronic filing and the use of electronic signatures. There's also an act called the Electronic Commerce Act 2000, which provides municipalities and its local boards and committees the ability to transact municipal business utilizing electronic signatures. And the act also outlines procedures to ensure that reliability and authenticity of the signatures are in place. So provided appropriate procedures are in place, the acceptance of electronic signatures will expedite workflow processes and improve customer service, not only in response to the pandemic, but well into the future. The attached policy, as well as the security and certificate features available with Adobe software, will allow the corporation to transact electronic signatures efficiently and securely. Just with respect to the policy, a couple things I'd like to point out. First of all, it's not mandatory that we use or accept electronic signatures. There are some documents, bylaws, for example, that we will definitely want to have personalized or wet signatures. And again, we may or may not permit, and on the other end, they may or may not permit electronic signatures as well. So we have to honor that, those requests. And it's not as though we're not going to be able to transact or sign documents. It's just that it's going to be a little bit more traditional, I guess, with respect to how we've always done it. The policy, again, as I said, does not limit the town's right to conduct a municipal transaction on paper and in the traditional form, nor affect the town's right or obligation to permit or require documents to be provided or made available on paper when permitted. And this policy should be reviewed at least every 4 years to make sure that it's current and that practices are being followed accordingly. So there are no financial implications associated with this report, although it does help in making those kinds of transactions a lot more efficient. With respect to the strategic plan, it checks off the box with sustainable municipal operations. So the recommendations that report CAO 0621 electronic signature policy be received, and that council approve policy ADM-021 as presented.
Thank you, Brian. Questions or comments? Councillor Fitzsimmons.
Thank you, Your Worship. I think this is very logical and both timely and needed given our current situation in the world. It's quite simply a new way that we're going to be conducting business from here on out for pretty much every business, I think. That being said, I wonder if there could be some kind of a threshold of importance where we use this or we don't use it, something we should consider.
Yeah, Your Worship, it's a great point that the councillor makes. I think I gave the example of bylaws. Okay, for sure. You know, we definitely want to be signing those. There are some important agreements that we also may want to consider not providing electronically. We could certainly sign them electronically, because if the body that's providing that agreement says that electronic signature is good enough for them, you know, I think it should be good enough for them. I think the real question is on our side, if we're comfortable having any of our documents signed electronically. I don't know if there's a threshold, as Councillor Fitzsimmons suggests, but I think you know, if we use our best common sense, I think we can pretty well filter out the ones that should have done electronically, and those that we can, those that we will want to have wet signatures on.
Okay. Any other questions, comments? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor? That is carried. Thank you. Item 6.2 is report HR 0221. This is the 2021 Compensation and Benefits Market Survey Terms of Reference. It's from Melissa Hilgendorf, our Human Resources Coordinator, and I need a mover and seconder to put that on the floor. So I have Councillor Dickert and Councillor Fleet. All yours, Melissa.
Thank you, Your Worship. So back in 2016, Warden Updegrove, which is a consulting firm, completed a compensation review for the town. And then in early 2017, council agreed to a number of recommendations from Warden Updegrove, including the implementation of a new pay grid, the adoption of a general philosophy of paying staff above the market median, and updating existing pay administration policies. So HR 018 salary pay grid policy was approved by council in December 2017, and it states that normally every 4 years, the entire pay band grid will be compared to the market to ensure the town is paying employees fairly and achieving external equity. 2021 marks 4 years from the implementation of the survey that was conducted by Warden Updegrove, so we're at a point now where it's time for another review. The terms of reference have been provided to outline the scope of work and the methodology for another market survey, which we would complete this year. And in recognition that benefits also form a main part of the overall total compensation package, our 2021 survey would focus on both compensation as well as benefit coverages. So I'd like to take a moment to review some of the details within the terms of reference, not everything, but particularly the methodology, which starts on page 2. So in step 1, it would involve the selection and approval of comparator municipalities based on a number of factors. And then data would be provided to council so that you can consider selecting the appropriate comparator municipalities. I believe last time there were over 20 municipalities originally submitted. Council had approved 18 of them for use, and then 16 of those comparators had agreed to participate. In step 2, we would develop our survey and send it out to our approved comparators to gather information from them. And it is time consuming for those municipalities. So to encourage comparators to participate, we would offer them a copy of our survey results and hopefully help them in their own efforts. For step 3, our information from step 2 would be used to calculate a market median for our job rates. And when I say job rate, that's kind of our upper rate of pay. So right now our pay bands consist of 8 steps. The job rate would be at step 8. The median method is very commonly used in compensation surveys because it eliminates the highest and lowest rates of pay surveyed to find a value that is like truly in the middle. This eliminates the potential skewing of data that can occur if you're using an average, especially if there are a bunch of exceptionally high or low hourly rates included in the data. To ensure that what we're calculating is reliable, we would require a minimum of half of our comparators to provide dependable data. and anywhere that a reliable median cannot be calculated, we would use our job evaluation scores to ensure that the position is placed appropriately on our salary grid. Once we've gathered the information, we would analyze it. And in accordance with our salary pay grid policy, the town's compensation rates would be compared against the 55th percentile of the market median. And by using the 55th percentile, basically what that means is the town would be paying more than 55% of our comparators. And this does provide us with that little bit of a competitive edge out in the recruiting market. Step 5 would then be an analysis of the benefit coverages, and step 6 would be a report brought to council detailing our survey findings and seeking direction regarding the implementation of any recommendations. As for financial implications, there are none associated with this report, and it does support strategic directions number 1, economic development, and strategic direction number 4, sustainable municipal operations. So the recommendation is that report HR 02-21, the 2021 Compensation and Benefits Market Survey terms of reference be received, and that council approve the attached terms of reference as presented.
Thank you, Melissa. Questions or comments? Councillor Dickert.
Thank you, Your Worship, and thank you for the report, Melissa. I think it's a good document. It gives a good basis for unbiased information. It gives us information to work on. It's fair to our ratepayers. It allows us to retain our employees. It keeps us in that good place for employee retention. And as you mentioned, it does put us in a good state for when we're out looking to recruit people. So I support it. I think it's well done, and I think it would serve us well.
Thank you.
Any other comments? Councillor Cable.
Thank you, Your Worship. Melissa, the living wage is currently $18.39 an hour, according to the United Way of Bruce Gray. Do we have any positions other than student positions that would be below the living wage currently?
There are. There's not a whole lot of them, but there are some. And so we would be looking at all of our positions on our non-union grid as part of this, and ensuring that we are consistent with that of our comparators, though I can't say how that will compare to the United Way suggested living wage at this point.
Okay. Would it ever be a consideration to look at what would happen if we were an employer that was committed to paying the living wage? I think that was something that some other municipalities had looked at when reviewing their grids, and I just didn't know if that's a consideration that we could explore as well.
That's certainly something that we could look at as part of our survey. Brian, do you have thoughts?
Yeah, it's just, Melissa, I don't think we have anybody below the living wage that's full-time. So.
That's correct. None of them full-time.
That's right. So, so everybody that's full-time is above the living wage.
Okay.
Other questions or comments? Deputy Mayor Hicks.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm just wondering if it's maybe not time for us to take another look at that sort of target percentile that we wish to be at. I know that we established that previously, but is 55% still the place that we want to be? You know, I would love to see an analysis of possibilities. You know, if we went to 60 or 65, I'm making this up, what would be that extra cost? This is sort of way a cost and benefit analysis of that. I don't think that we should necessarily stay stuck at the 55. It may end up being that 55 is right, or maybe 50. But I would like to see us maybe look at that 55th percentile place and see if we can't maybe tweak it a bit.
Yeah, there's nothing to say you can't do 58, you know, or 62 or 61, and the analysis will advise us.
Yes, we can bring back some different options in the analysis, and then start there. And if council would like to see anything further, we can look into that as well.
Okay. Any Councillor Fleet?
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you, Melissa, for your report. Do we have a very big turnover of staff? Like our staff is fairly long-term, happy staff, I guess.
Yeah, usually I would say, especially with full-time staff, that the positions are fairly consistent. Once someone's in there, they do tend to stay, which is really great. We do have more of a turnover in some of our part-time roles, not all of them. Particularly, you know, the seasonal students and that type of thing, they might stay with us for a few years throughout their high school years, and then they carry on. But outside of those roles, we don't have a whole lot of turnover.
Okay, thank you.
Brian, you have a comment?
Yeah, Your Worship, I would echo Melissa's comments there on turnover. In my experience, in almost 30 years of it, we have probably the lowest turnover of staff I've seen in municipal government. And it's not because we're paying a ton of money. I think there's working conditions, and I think that, you know, the people that we recruit generally want to be here. But as I've indicated to council, in the last while, we're going to have a significant turnover in the next few years. And that's not because people want to leave, but they're getting to the point where, you know, they're retirement age. So, you know, so we will, yeah, the statistics will show that we've got a significant turnover in the next 5 years. But again, it's because you've got long-serving, experienced staff that are going to move on to the next phase.
Very good. Thanks, Brian. Any other comments? Deputy Mayor Hicks.
Sorry, I should have maybe mentioned this previously. Many of the conferences that we've been going to have featured sessions on this very issue. We know that the municipal sector throughout Ontario, and frankly throughout Canada, is going through a very, very competitive stage right now. Everybody is hungry for new talent because there's a lot of retirements happening. So I think we're going to have to be, you know, cognizant of that and perhaps even aggressive in our approach if we're going to remain competitive. That said, I don't want to leave Councillor Cable's point that he tried to raise about the living wage. I don't want to quite leave that. Would it be possible in this report to get a figure for what it would cost to bump up? You mentioned there are not many salaries that are below the living wage. If that's the case, then maybe the cost wouldn't be terribly expensive for us to make sure that everyone who works for the town of Hanover is earning a living wage. I think that figure exists for a reason. It would be nice to say that we embrace that, or at least that we considered it. And it may be appropriate in some instances. Maybe I need to be sold on that, but I would at least like to see what that figure would be.
Brian?
Yeah, Your Worship, Deputy Mayor Hicks brings up a good point. I just want to remind council that some of these positions may be in the collective agreement, and so those things would have to be negotiated separately. So I kind of want to keep some of those discussions outside of this particular exercise.
Okay. All right, I'm going to call the question. I don't see any more hands. All in favor of the report? That's carried. Thank you. Item 6.3 is report DCS 0821. It's the elimination of the vacant unit rebate program. It's from Chris Walker, our Director of Corporate Services and Treasurer, and I need a mover and seconder to put that on the floor. I have Councillor Fitzsimmons and Councillor Hawking. All yours, Chris.
Thank you, Your Worship. Council may remember way back in 2001 when we were all younger, the province added a vacancy unit rebate program that provided eligible commercial and industrial properties the ability to apply for a 30 or 35% rebate of the property taxes if they were empty for a long period of time, usually with 90 days or more within a year. This program was originally implemented as a short-term aid to property owners back in those difficult economic times back in 2001. However, many owners have seen this rebate used over many years, and they basically stayed empty the whole time and just constantly are applying for vacancy unit rebate. So in 2017, the province reviewed that vacancy unit rebate program, and it was in response to many municipalities concerned about the appropriateness of this lower tax level provided through these programs and the unintended implications that have for local economies. So this was reviewed. This review allowed local municipalities the flexibility to tailor the rebate and reduction programs locally, but it had to be coordinated with the upper tier. So any municipalities that have pursued the changes to the vacancy unit rebate actually made the decision to immediately opt out rather than make any reforms to that program. In 2019, the province actually reduced the rebates on the education portion and the subclass discounts for education by 50% in 2019, and they eliminated it totally in 2020. So where we're giving back the 30 and 35%, they were only giving 15%. And then they eliminated it to actually, they're not getting a rebate at all. That was for the education portion. So it made it very difficult when you had to do upper tier and lower tier portion, as well as education all at the same time. So you're doing all these different calculations. So in the fall of 2019, municipalities of the lower tier of Grey County all recommended that the county coordinate towards the elimination of the vacancy rebate program. And that was the consensus to no longer serve the purpose for which it was created. So this was to get underway in 2020 and coordinated by the county. And by doing that, it required an online information campaign and a survey under the 2017 guidelines from the province. However, as we know, in 2020, COVID-19 delayed that progress. In December of this past year in 2020, the provincial government made changes to the Municipal Act, provided the ability for local municipalities to actually pass a bylaw eliminating the rebate of or changing the rules without undergoing the campaign and or survey. So under these new rules, each local area municipality didn't need the approval of the Grey County or the upper tier to eliminate the program. So we had meetings with both of the county treasurers and all the municipal lower tier treasurers back in late February and again in early March to reiterate what we had already talked about in 2019, of fall of 2019 prior to COVID. And that was the consensus was to support the elimination of the vacancy unit rebate program with a local municipal bylaw. So as part of the town's strategic plan, direction 1 under the economic development, there was an action plan number 6 that we continue to lobby County Council for this removal of the tax rebate, only knowing in the past that since December 2020, they have now allowed actual local municipalities to be able to do that. So this changes in that municipality have provided us that ability to go forward. And as part of the countywide initiative for all local municipalities to eliminate this program, staff is recommending that a bylaw be presented at the next council meeting to eliminate the vacancy unit rebate program effective with this 2021 taxation year. This will not affect the 2020 taxes. And now you got to remember when you're doing your 2020 tax rebate, it always goes the following year. So anything in the budget for 2021 is actually for 2020 taxes. So there is no effect on our actual budget for 2021 because, as I've just mentioned, they're for 2020 taxes. There is an amount of $20,000 already in the budget for these rebates. And I've also given you a list there for the past 5 years of the amount that we've been providing in rebates. And it ranges from 20 down to about 16 different properties, and they're almost always the same ones each year that are getting the rebate, and they range from 15,000 up to 21,000 over the past 5 years. So the link to our strategic plan, obviously we actually had an actual plan for that under the Economic Development Strategic Direction number 1, and also our Sustainable Municipal Operations. So it is staff's recommendation that this report DCS 0821 for the elimination of the vacant unit rebate program be received, and that council request a bylaw be presented at the next council meeting to eliminate the vacancy unit rebate program in the town of Hanover, effective with the 2021 taxes. That's it.
Thank you, Chris.
Comments?
Questions? Councillor Fitzsimmons.
Thank you, Your Worship. I very much look forward to this bylaw at our next council meeting. This is long overdue. But I just had a question, Chris. How many properties roughly, when we see this number from 2020, 16,609, how many properties roughly are tapping into that funding?
16 were in 2020 for the 16,609. There was 21 in 2018, let's see, if we go 2016, there was 19, 2017, there was 20, 2018, there was 21, 2019, there was 13, 2020, there's 16, and to date for 2020, actual taxation year in 2021 is 12 that we have received. So it's pretty well all within the same numbers, constantly putting in the same amount.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Deputy Mayor Hicks.
Thank you, Your Worship, and thank you, Chris, for the report. All I can say is hallelujah. I mean, this report and this move has been long, long overdue. We have been incentivizing people doing nothing with their property, and the evidence of that, you can just look at our downtown and pick out the property where nothing happens, you know, not just for a year or two, but for decades. It does nothing for the look of your town, and it's grossly unfair to incentivize someone at the cost of other taxpayers to do nothing with their property and get a benefit from that. There's no benefit to the taxpayer. So I'm really glad to see this come forward, and the fact that the province has moved to allow the lower tiers to take charge of this is also great. So here we go. I'm glad to see it.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions or comments? All right, all in favor? That is carried. Thank you. Item 6.4 is report FI 0521. It is the fire safety grant. It's from our fire chief, Chief Deniger. Chief. Oh, I need a mover and seconder. Councillor Cable and Councillor Fleet. Okay, good to go now.
Well, thank you, Your Worship. On March 11th, the Government of Ontario announced a one-time $5 million grant to municipal fire services to assist in addressing challenges associated with training and virtual inspections due to COVID-19. Funding is focused on enhancing fire safety training across the province and supporting fire safety inspection programs. Hanover Fire Department's funding amount was $6,400. In discussion with Fire Prevention Officer Rob Hagan, both of us felt our inspection process is effective and efficient. The grant can be used for 4 training items as far as we can see. A new laptop, number 1. The OFM is moving to more online and blended course offerings for fire departments. As a result, a computer is required to complete the necessary coursework and at times classwork. Some of our staff do not have a laptop, and as a result, a laptop would be available for the staff to utilize for fire department courses. There's also a flow path training aid, which would be considered as a joint purchase between Grey Highlands Fire and Southgate Fire. This is a one-of-a-kind training aid to demonstrate for firefighters things like fire progression, flow path movement, and how the fire reacts to ventilation activities. This will enhance firefighter safety as well as assisting with risk versus benefit decisions firefighters have to make as a result of fire progression. The unit is over $10,000 to purchase, but the cost sharing makes it affordable with the grant. Third would be a fire command simulator purchased again with Grey Highlands Fire and Southgate Fire. This computer tool will assist our officers to continually improve their command experience and knowledge by utilizing simulated fire simulations on buildings in our municipality. The simulator will also assist firefighters with training on reading smoke, building construction, fire behavior, and pre-planning activities. The cost of this unit is over $3,000, but again, the cost sharing makes it much more affordable for us. The balance of $414.40 would be utilized to offset annual training priorities that have escalated as a result of COVID-19. The application for the funds was due March 19th, and as such, staff were required to complete the application to meet the deadline. However, council support of the grant is required by the province. Funds are to be utilized by August 1st of 2021. The financial implications of this plan with the partnership mentioned, we're able to leverage $14,771 in training aids with our allotted grant of $6,400. There will be no impact to the 2021 budget as a result of this grant use. The link to the strategic plan was for regional center, a community as well as sustainable municipal operations. The recommendation, excuse me, is that report FI 0521 fire safety grant be received, that council pass a resolution approving the proposed uses for the fire safety grant as outlined, and that the mayor and clerk be authorized to sign the attached fire safety grant transfer payment agreement between the province and the town of Hanover. If there are any questions, I'd be happy to answer.
Thank you, Chief. Any questions? Deputy Mayor Hicks?
Sorry, just one very quick comment. It's always really nice to see collaboration.
Thank you. Okay, I'll call the question. All in favor? That's carried. Thank you. Item 6.5 is report ED 0321. The subject is the Community Improvement Program application and approval authority recommendation. It's from April Marshall, our economic development manager, and I need a mover and seconder, and I'll take Councillor Dickert and Councillor Hawking. All yours, April.
Thank you, Your Worship. So on March 1st, just a little over a month ago, we launched our CIP, our Community Improvement Program, and that was the opportunity for us to offer incentives to spur development in the town of Hanover. So we have received an application for 453 9th Street. And that application is a conversion of an existing vacant building, and the conversion will accommodate 2 new businesses. Improvements will include completion of facade work, which is brickwork, exterior windows, doors, expansion to facilitate the new businesses. And then inside is the conversion of the vacant space to accommodate those businesses by updating the walls and the wiring and all of that stuff inside. So with the Director of Development and CBO, the CAO clerk, and myself, we identified that this project does meet the criteria for our community improvement program, and we think that is a really good opportunity to see a new use in this building that has been vacant for quite some time, and to be able to put some measurement behind it and show that we will have 2 new businesses that are coming to town because of it as well. In an effort in the future for these applications, we found this process to work really well in consultation with the CAO clerk, Director of Development, and myself, to ensure that we're meeting all the criteria. And then we also thought that we have the Economic Development Committee and the Planning Advisory Committee to fall back on for additional supports. So just in an effort to process the applications effectively in the future, we are recommending that we continue with this system and then report back to council on an annual basis when we're deliberating or when we're creating our budgets, and we're reporting back on the work that we've done as well. So with this specific application for 453 9th Street, it'll see approximately $77,000 in improvements, and the total grant request amount is $20,000. And again, we'll see those 2 new businesses and new life being brought to that building. We also, just lending back to that decision-making process and the whole community improvement plan or program as a whole, although council would designate some approval authority as far as those grant stream intake applications, the tax increment financing, and the municipal property acquisition investment and partnership program would still remain at the discretion and decision of council. So the link to the strategic plan with this, it does hit all of our strategic initiatives: economic development, community, environment, and sustainable municipal operations. And the recommendation is that report ED 03-21 Community Improvement Program or CIP application and approval authority recommendation be received, that administration be directed to enter into a community improvement program funding agreement with the owners of 453 9th Street, and that administration be directed to bring forward an amending bylaw designating approval authority for applications as outlined. I would be happy to answer any questions anyone may have.
Thanks, April. Remind me again, the grant money is given out when the project is complete, right?
Yes, they do get an inspection through the building permit process, and they are to pay the invoices that were applied for as well, and then we reimburse after we get those paid receipts and that we see that the work is done. So if the work does come in at a lower cost than what they had applied for, the grant is recalculated to go below. It will not go higher, but it will go below.
Good, thank you. Any questions, other questions for April or comments? I don't see any, April. None. Oh, Councillor Cable, yes.
I think Councillor Cable has one.
Just a quick comment, Your Worship. I think it's great to see that the CIP is being used already. I think it's wonderful that the owners of this property, which has been vacant for a long time, are taking advantage of this, and I look forward to seeing what's going to happen on 9th Street. You always keep me guessing, so that's good.
Okay.
I think I can disclose, oh, sorry, Your Worship. I think I can disclose that the one business is a hot tub business. So they called me today, so I'm aware that they are coming.
That's good. So, all right, I'll call the question. All in favor? That is carried. Thank you. Thanks, April. Okay, item 6.6 is report PW 0521. The subject is the 21st Avenue A storm sewer rehabilitation tender. It's from our Director of Public Works, Ron Cooper, and I need a mover and seconder to put this on the floor. Councillor Fleet and Councillor Dickert. Okay, Ron.
Thank you, Worship. In 2018, rehabilitation work was completed on the storm sewer from 14th Street to north of 16th Street Crescent. Work included replacement of the storm outfall, slope stabilization, and grouting of areas of infiltration. In 2020, the system was re-videoed, which confirmed that the previous work had stabilized the storm sewer, but to eliminate further deterioration, the storm sewer should be relined. At that time, the condition of the twin 2200 millimeter culverts underneath the walking trail north of 16th Crescent was also reviewed. In consideration of the scope of the entire rehabilitation project, it was recommended that it be completed in 3 stages. Stage 1 being the walking trail twin culverts and the storm sewer outlet north of 16th Street Crescent. Stage 2, 21st Avenue A from 16th Street Crescent to 16th Street. And Stage 3, 21st Avenue A from 16th Street to 14th Street. Stage 1 of the rehabilitation has been included in the 2021 capital budget. It's anticipated that Stage 2 and Stage 3 will follow in subsequent years. A tender was put together and was advertised on Bid and Go. 3 tenders were received by the closing date and time of 2 p.m. on Monday, March the 8th. Based upon the tender results, a further review was completed on the options for the twin 2200 millimeter diameter culverts beneath the walking trail. The original tender was for a reline structural replacement based upon traffic load requirements. A further addendum was issued prior to releasing the tender results, requesting that the contractors provide pricing based upon invert repair and provide lining coating to 450 millimeters above the invert to seal the bottom of the culverts to protect against corrosion and abrasion. That is effectively where the problem is with the 2 larger twin inlet culverts. It's with the invert and the very lower section of it. We received pricing from both Pipeflow Contracting and Infrastructure Coatings Corporation for the revised scope of work for the rehabilitation of the twin 2200 diameter culverts. based upon the prices that we had got in, the total price from pipe flow contracting was $288,300. The price from Infrastructure Coating Corporation was $220,000. Our budget for the three items, which we had got pricing for, was $241,500. The recommendation is to proceed with the work being proposed by Infrastructure Coatings Corporation from Vaughan, which they have previously completed similar projects for the City of Toronto and York region. References indicate that the coating system is quite durable, with quality of work they're performing being good. The completion of the work will take an estimated 12 to 15 working days. The work will be completed robotically on the 21st Avenue A storm sewer and hand spraying for the larger walking trail culverts. For the 21st Avenue A portion, a bypass will be set up with ramp access to the affected driveways. Time frame for completion of the work is late April or May, based upon weather conditions, as they want to make sure that there's no significant rain forecasted the period of time when they would be working on this storm sewer section. Financial implications of this is that the budget to complete the work was $241,500, excluding HST. The tender by Infrastructure Coatings Corporation, based upon relining of the two sections of the storm sewer on 21st Avenue A, an invert rehabilitation of the two 2,200 millimeter diameter culverts on the walking trail is $220,000, which is $21,500 or 8.9% under budget. The link to the strategic plan is Sustainable Municipal Operations, which involves the rehabilitation of municipal infrastructure. There was attached some sketches which had shown pictures of the twin inlet culverts beneath the walking trail. Also shows the section on 21st Avenue, which is a curb section. By performing this type of work, it will not involve excavation or disruption of any of the curb or finished surfaces. And it was identified in the tender that we were going between two sections of manhole. That's identified on another sketch. Is one of the areas of entry where we'll be doing the work is in the driveway by house number 741. The other structure is in a grassed area beside house number 712. And those two sections is to the outfall. The recommendation is that report PW 05-2021, 21st Avenue A storm sewer rehabilitation tender be received, that the project be awarded to Infrastructure Coatings Corporation for a total cost of $220,000 plus HST, and that the mayor and clerk be authorized to enter into a contract with Infrastructure Coatings Corporation for completion of this work. I would be glad to answer any questions of council regarding this project.
Thank you, Ron. Questions or comments? Councillor Dickert?
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you, Ron. Can you just help me better understand what invert rehabilitation is for those two culverts underneath the walkway?
The invert rehabilitation is it would be filling any voids that exist in the bottom portion of the culvert, and it would be aligning up to the height of 450 millimeters from the invert upwards. So it affects, we're relining the portion which has had some abrasion working on the culverts. Any parts above that have seen no effects on the culvert.
Yeah, no, I recognize this is that lower section of the culvert where the damage is. I just didn't know whether how they would repair any dents or gouges in that other section. Is it how do they rehabilitate that? Because it's corrugated stainless steel.
Yeah, good point. That question on one of the outlets there is a tear in the culvert at the outlet. So they're looking at rewelding CSB plate in that section. So that is part of the repair work that's going to be completed.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Other questions or comments? I will call the question. All in favor? That's carried. Thank you. Item 6.7 is report PRC 0321. This is the Parks Assessment Recommendation. It's from Sherry Walden, our Director of Parks, Recreation and Culture. And I need a mover and seconder, and I'll take Councillor Cable and Councillor Fitzsimmons. Sherry?
Thank you, Your Worship. Really pleased to bring this report forward. It's been a long time coming and a considerable amount of work by our Parks, Recreation and Culture Advisory Committee. So the report that is before you this evening is that report PRC 0321, Parks Assessment Recommendation be received, and that Hanover Council support the Parks, Recreation and Culture Advisory Committee's recommendations with respect to park assessments as outlined. As Council is aware, in 2018, our Parks, Recreation and Culture Master Plan was completed and endorsed by Council. The plan identified the noted 7 objectives included in the report and are associated with the outdoor parks and playgrounds. The objectives, as noted, are detailed, and I'll just summarize them verbally. The first dealt with an inventory and database of facilities and creating that comprehensive inventory. The next was to assess our outdoor facilities and their ability to deliver multi-generational spaces, the opportunity to develop placemaking opportunities, developing initiatives that allow our children and youth to connect with nature, repurposing of existing parkland, increasing play value of new playgrounds, and establishing a long-term strategy for renovating aging facilities tied to this town's asset management plan. And all of our pieces of playground equipment are included in our asset management plan. The Parks, Recreation and Culture Advisory Committee has focused their work on this priority, and they developed a parks assessment tool for parks and playground equipment with a focus on the play structure, the park site, and the experienced. And this was created with various input pieces from July 2019 to February 2021. Pandemic unfortunately paused our work a little bit last year. As noted, the assessments were based on the following considerations: the play structure assessment, which really looked at the audience appeal, the equipment age and condition and accessibility, the park area, its access, its location, its visibility, the attractiveness of the grounds, shade, etc., and the experiential assessment. What activities happen here? What could happen here? What was unique? Are there any barriers? That type of thing. Appendix A, which is included in the report, includes a summarize of all the assessment notes from our Parks, Recreation and Culture Advisory Committee. At our March 24th meeting, the committee recommended that Council approve the parks assessment objectives. There is 7 of them, 2, 4, 6, 7. Sorry, I should have counted them ahead of time. There are 7 of them. I am going to read them verbatim because I think they're very important, not only for Council, but any of our public members listening to hear these objectives. The first is to conduct a third-party inspection of our parks with playground equipment to assist with determining current playground equipment condition and establishing priorities for replacement and/or enhancement. To plan for a center of excellence or destination park at the Hanover Park location in partnership with a community organization such as a service club, to facilitate and establish a memorandum of understanding with such community organization and then implement the plan. To reduce to 1 neighborhood park with playground equipment in the northeast quadrant of the town, given the close proximity of the existing parks of Robert F. Steers Memorial Park, often referred to as Legion Park, and Knet Park. To consider the third-party parks inspection findings to determine the timing and specific neighborhood park. To consider and plan for the alternate use for the park in the northeast quadrant of the town from which the playground equipment is removed. To relocate playground equipment from Knet Totland Park, so that's immediately behind the P&H Center, if deemed possible, to the most suitable park with playground equipment. To consider and plan for alternate use of this space. To maintain playground equipment and prepare a replacement and enhancement plan with estimated costs based on the third-party assessment for Kinsman Ballpark, Optimus Park, and the park in the northeast quadrant confirmed to include playground equipment. And lastly, to consider a process for community input on aspects of the proposed replacement and enhancement plan. I would just verbally add that our last playground equipment install was approximately in 2010. So these objectives are very timely and, in my opinion, long overdue. The resolution passed by the committee is attached to the report as Appendix B. The third-party inspection will be scheduled for this spring, and the subsequent report will allow the committee to consider and determine the Northeast Quadrant Park with playground equipment direction, as well as to prepare a replacement and enhancement plan as noted in E as one of the objectives. At this time, the only financial implication is for the cost of the third-party assessment, estimated to be $4,000 plus taxes. And that cost, it is suggested that it be covered from Parks reserves, as it was not included in our 2021 budget. As implementation evolves, further reports, including cost implications, will be provided for Council's consideration. The objectives provided will be certainly short-term direction, but also buying into that long-term piece that deals with our parks and our playground equipment. The link to the strategic plan is community, as well as sustainable municipal operations. Through you, the worship, I'd be happy to answer any questions or provide clarification.
Thanks, Sherry. Council, Councillor Fitzsimmons, then Councillor Cable.
Thank you, Your Worship, and a ton of amazing work going into this to bring it to this stage. But Sherry, I just wondered if you could elaborate a little bit further on letter B regarding the Center of Excellence Destination Park at the Hanover Park and the role that a service club might play in that, and kind of what your vision is of what you think that would look like.
Well, you know, I think of my parent hat, I guess, a little bit. And often when my children were younger and we would go to, you know, spend some time in parks in the summertime, we would really strive to go to a community that had what I would call or describe as a destination park. We really went there to go to the playground. And there are certainly some in Grey Bruce that I think meet that criteria. So it's establishing that here in Hanover. We have some great green spaces. Our playground equipment is, I would say, adequate, but I think it's showing its age and it's tired. And there is an opportunity specifically at the Hanover Park location because of its location, its proximity to the Saugeen River, etc., to create something that would draw people to our community for that day trip to go to the playground or the park. As for vision, that would be something that would evolve through a development. And we would really look to have our potential partner or partners involved in that. There's a number of things with that site that we'll need to take into consideration accordingly. So that provides a little bit of a kind of overview. I guess I would really like to see something that's eye-catching from the road to draw people into the park, and then making use of the green space and the river views, etc.
Thanks, Sherry.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor Cable.
Thank you, Your Worship, and thank you, Sherry. I'm very excited about this report, as this is a significant step in the work that the Parks Rec and Culture Advisory Committee has been completing since 2018. And the steps that are outlined, which Sherry outlined, will really shape Hanover Parks going forward. And I think that they'll help to ensure that families and residents of all ages have spaces to be both active and to play. So I think it's a great opportunity for us to really reimagine what park spaces could look like in the town of Hanover. And it's going to be an exciting next steps going forward.
Okay, thank you. Deputy Mayor Hicks.
Thank you, Your Worship. I smile a little bit as I listen or read this report, because I remember the days when my young son, a young Selwyn, was questioning the mayor, Bob White, at the time about when we can get some decent equipment in some of our parks. And this was prior to the upgrades to our, what's the big park? What do we call it?
Hanover Park.
Hanover Park, thank you. My question is, and I'm sure, why was this item not included in the 2021 budget?
So through you, Your Worship, because we had paused some of our input with the pandemic, we weren't quite at a point from advisory committee to include that in the budget. So it's just come to fruition and be finalized as an objective in the last few months. So of course, our budget timelines were much before that. So hence why it wasn't included, is suggested it can be covered through reserves.
Thank you.
Okay, I don't see any other questions or hands. I will call the question. All in favor? That is carried. So item 7 is reports and correspondence for information. Before we start, let's take a 5-minute break. Let's come back at 8:45, stretch your legs, and we'll be good to go for the next part of the meeting. So if you can turn your video off and mute, please. There he is. Okay, so we are back in session from a short break. Item 7 is reports and correspondence for information. So we have 7.1. This is report ED 0421. It's HIP, Hanover's Innovative People Program, Attraction and Retention Program. It's from April Marshall, our Economic Development Manager. April?
Thank you, Your Worship. So we were fortunate to have a delegation earlier about this whole program, so I won't spend too much time on it. But I just wanted you to have some tangible pieces or written pieces around it so that you have further explanation on the different pillars that will make up this campaign for attraction and retention efforts. And again, this is just an opportunity for us to leverage our assets and a response to many of our strategic directions. We noted we utilize the cultural plan, our economic development plan, and our corporate strategic plans. And I think working with BC Hughes, we've done a fine job in identifying, what those priorities are and our best response for them. So we will be taking this time to start to implement this program and get all those pieces in place. And we're very fortunate to have received funding through the Rural Economic Development Fund for half of the cost for this campaign for the development of it and also the implementation. So the recommendation is being that report ED 0421, Hanover's Innovative People Program, or HIP as we'll be calling it, Attraction and Retention Program, be received for information. And if anyone has any further questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Thanks, April. Any questions come to mind since Councillor Cable?
One quick one, Your Worship. April, will Bluewater District School Board and Bruce Grade Catholic and perhaps the French school board as well, but will they be involved as part of the apprentice campaign? Just thinking of ways to kind of spread that message.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Cable. Definitely. So thank you for bringing that up, because these campaigns, especially the apprentice campaign, is the success of it is going to be based off our partnerships and collaboration. We don't want to be duplicating any efforts or recreating any wheels. So that's part of our process right now as well, is reaching out to the school boards, reaching out to the 4 County Labor Market Board. I know that they're working on some video pieces. So we're just looking right now on how we can utilize what they're already doing, how we can build it into this. And then, yes, that whole curriculum piece back with the schools as well, so that we can tie it all together, because the ultimate goal, especially of that apprentice stream, is to make this easy for our youth to know what those apprenticeship opportunities are and how they can go through that process.
Okay, good. All right, thanks, April. 7.2 is report FI 0621. This is the monthly activity report for March 2021, and it's from our fire chief, Chief Denninger. Chief.
Thank you, Your Worship. As you stated, this is the fire report for March. And as you can see, March had a total of 16 calls. The first being medicals, second being rescues, and third being false fire calls. The annual fire calls to the end of March were 35. And again, 1 was medical, 2 was rescue, and 3 was false fire calls. There was a total of 16 inspections completed, 16 reports issued, and 10 are still in progress. There was 2 Alarm for Life visits. None of the homes were compliant. And we were able to do 1 public education activity, which was a walk by of a JK class. So we were able to do show them the trucks. And that was about all we were able to do in March. And if there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer.
I'm sure that class really enjoyed that too. I bet you they did. Any comments or questions for the chief? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on. Item 7.3, this is the Police Services Board meeting minutes from March 15th. And I will highlight that. The chair, Dawn Smith, and I attended the virtual OAPSB, which is the Ontario Association of Police Services Board, the Zone 5 conference. And the guest speaker was Devin Clunas, and he is the newly appointed Inspector General of Policing. And his role will be to provide oversight of policing in Ontario. And I'm sure you saw it in the minutes, but the police service now has a website of its own, which you can access at hanoverpolice.ca. It is operational and all links and forms are being checked to see if everything works. So this is a soft launch right now. So if you have any comments to share, please do so. You can let me know and I can pass it on to the chief, or you can let the chief know. And if there's any questions, I can try and answer them. Seeing none. 7.4 is the Hanover Public Library Board meeting minutes from March 25th. Councillor Fitzsimmons.
Thank you, Your Worship. Some more conversation regarding the OLA Super Conference from a couple of our members that attended some of the virtual events there. Also, the putting together of our annual report message from the board. We're just finessing through that, and you'll see that shortly with tax bills. And the one thing to note regarding the Finance Committee is, as expected, there was a $24,000 library surplus that was returned to the town of Hanover, of course, with all the budget challenges that we had. So they were happy to be able to do that. So not unexpected, though.
Any questions or comments? And speaking on behalf of council, we do appreciate that surplus being returned, and I think it would be suitable for us to send a letter to the library board thanking them. So that will be coming.
Thank you.
Item 7.5 is the Committee of Adjustment meeting minutes from March 30th. Councillor Cable.
Thank you, Your Worship. The Committee of Adjustment met on March the 30th to review a minor variance application for 890 8th Ave North with Ian and Teresa Mills. And so the purpose of the application was to vary the front yard setback on their property in order to allow for the enlargement of an existing shed and the construction of a carport, which is really going to be more like a garage at their home. And after discussion and review of the project by Mr. Mills, the minor variance application was granted.
Okay, good, thank you. Item 7.6, the Saugeen Mobility and Regional Transit, otherwise known as SMART, the board meeting minutes from January 22nd. Councillor Dickert.
Thank you, Your Worship. Highlights from that meeting: we reviewed our 2020 annual report prior to sending it out to all the partners. Overall, our ridership was down as a result of COVID, 54% overall, and Hanover down 56%, so very much in line with what everybody else was experiencing. We reviewed the operational reports for November and December, reviewed and approved several revised HR policies, had our election of officers for the 2021 year, and we identified some priority work for 2021, which would be reviewing of the partnership agreement and bylaws and implementing a safety reporting program. So those things, along with other activities, will be worked on throughout 2021.
Good. Any questions for Councillor Dickert? Councillor Cable.
Congratulations, Councillor Dickert, on your appointment as president of SMART. I'm sure that will be a very exciting year ahead for you.
Thank you, Councillor Cable. It has started off that way, yes.
Okay, good. Item 7.7 and 7.8 is the Saugeen Municipal Airport Commission meeting minutes, a special meeting for March 1st and a media release. Councillor Hawking.
Yes, basically, that's what I was going to say, Your Worship. 7.7 is just showing the action that came out of a special meeting. The idea that we're going to develop a workplace harassment and respect workplace policy, and then the issue of trespass notices and the termination of an access agreement. And then followed up with, we issued a press release outlining the many things that we've accomplished in our term at the airport. It was just a positive message for the community. I'll open to any questions.
Yes, that was good to see, Councillor Hawking. Don't see any questions, so we'll move on. Item 7.9, this is correspondence from the Ministry of the Solicitor General, congratulating our municipality for being in compliance with the Emergency Management and Civil Protection Act, congratulating our efforts in achieving compliance in 2020, and that's our municipal emergency management programs. And I don't know, Chief, did you want to comment any further, or that's we do this every year, right? And we are compliant every year.
Yes, throughout the year, we have to accomplish certain activities to make sure that we're hitting everything the province wants us to see from an emergency management perspective. So the program committee does a lot of work throughout the year to make sure that they're reviewing all the documents necessary, revising them as needed, and making sure that everything is prepared for an emergency in case one happens.
Right, just like the pandemic. Thanks, Chief. Item 7.10 is correspondence from the Ministry of Finance. This is about the Ontario Cannabis Legalization Implementation Fund. And it's stating that funding will be provided on a per household basis to municipalities that did not opt out of hosting retail stores. So each recipient municipality will receive at least $5,000. So that's just notice from them. And 7.11 is from the Ontario Recreation Facilities Association. It's an open letter from them thanking their 7,000 plus members for providing critically important frontline and management services to our communities during this pandemic. That was nice of them to acknowledge them. Item 7.12, this is a poster from the Community Safety and Wellbeing Plan advising us that there's going to be another survey and to complete round 2 of this survey. And it still amazes me, I like to read this. There's 16 municipalities, 2 counties, 8 police services, 14 police service boards, and more than 30 education, health, and social service organizations across Bruce and Grey counties working together to improve the safety and well-being of Bruce and Grey through community safety and well-being planning. I think that's just amazing that all of those groups have come together to work for Grey and Bruce. Well done. So item 8, oh, Councillor Dickert, sorry.
Sorry, thank you, Your Worship. Just a quick question. I know that the young lady that was leading us through that, or was leading that program, had moved on. Have they found a replacement for her?
I'll ask Mr. Teixeira. Brian, have you been notified?
Your Worship, they're actually, I think the application deadline was last week. So I imagine right now the steering committee is in the process of reviewing applications, and hopefully we'll have somebody online in the meantime shortly. Sarah Cowley, who was the previous coordinator has continued to work in the evenings in helping the committee, the advisory, as well as the steering committee get through the interview or get through the survey process. So yeah, we're hoping that there's a new coordinator on board pretty soon.
Mhm.
They did a good job, and it's just, we would like to certainly see it continues.
Yeah, it's certainly a big loss, but she is, you know, she's taken on a full-time position at the YMCA, you know, in Sound, and she'll do a great job there. The nice thing about that is that they're also partners in this planning, in this plan, so she won't be too far away.
Right, that's good. Okay, so item 8 is planning and other meetings. And while we had that short break, Vicki did share the screen. So I'm going to start reading the meetings. And this is just so everyone is aware we have these meetings and they're welcome to join them. They are all open meetings, and you can find this information on our website and just click on those Zoom IDs and you'll be able to watch those meetings. So the first one, the Planning Advisory Committee meeting is Tuesday, April 13th at 5 p.m. There is a public meeting on Monday, April 19th at 7 p.m. This public meeting is concerning a proposed subdivision and zoning bylaw amendment. It will take place during our council meeting on April 19th. And the proposed zoning bylaw amendment would rezone lands described as part of lots 9 and 10, concessions 1 and 2. And the easiest way for me to describe it is the lands north of what I call the Bruceberry subdivision, but south of the Saugeen River, just so our public knows what corner of the community we're looking at. 8.3 is the Cultural Roundtable Committee meeting from Tuesday, April 7th, or on Tuesday, April 7th. The Heritage Committee is Thursday, April 15th at 10 a.m. The Age Friendly Committee meeting is Tuesday, April 20th at 2 p.m. Economic Development is Wednesday, April 21st at 9 a.m. And the Saugeen Municipal Airport is their meeting is Wednesday, April 21st at 1:30. The Parks, Recreation, and Culture Advisory Committee is Wednesday, April 28th at 7 p.m. So dates to remember: our next council meeting is Monday, April 19th at 7 p.m. Our next regular committee, the whole meeting, is Monday, May 3rd at 7 p.m. At this time, I'll ask if there's any notices of motion. Councillor Hawking.
No notice of motion, but there's a typo on one of the meetings. The Cultural Roundtable Committee meeting is Wednesday, April the 7th.
Oh, okay, good catch.
Okay, thank you.
You get 2 points for that. Okay, so the next regular council meeting is Monday, April 19th at 7, and the committee of the whole meeting is May 3rd at 7. Any notices of motion? Seeing none, we do not have a closed meeting, and I will ask for a mover and seconder to adjourn at 9:03. I have Councillor Hawking and Councillor Fleet. All in favor? That's carried. Good meeting, everyone. Thanks very much.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night.